Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Bonjour.
Bienvenue.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar organized by International Network of Basin Organizations. Carlos, be most welcome for today's topic dedicated to information systems on water, and more precisely on the sharing of data and information on the management of water resources. It is a major stake and challenge. It's been going on for years and is still timely and is still in the agenda. We have been mobilized on this question for over 25 years in more than 50 countries. It is very interesting for us to see the progress that was achieved on this question in different contexts at international level, and being able to share with a large number of leading international organizations and partners and friends this concern. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank beforehand the colleagues for all their interventions and presentations that they're going to be making later on. So for documentary or by introductory remarks on water, you know that in 2018 during the World Water Forum in Brasilia, the INBO, with a range of UN water organizations, we have published a handbook, as we call them, in-house, a reference document with documentations and water information systems on water and information on water, what we call the Water Data Initiative. And this is the first time for a long time since that Brazil conference. In April, by the way, we have also made and organized an event. So after a webinar in November dedicated to a much more European approach around a European project, Feeware for Water, we have looked more precisely at what new technologies artificial intelligence can bring to the information sharing, data sharing, not only at basin level, by the way. And today we're all gathering to focus even more to all those issues relating to the data sharing. As you know, our entry point at the INBO organization is a technological one, but rather is indeed technical and technological, but also very human, based on governance, sharing of data between players and actors and stakeholders. So the data sharing is our mindset. So in a couple of sessions, we're going to be addressing all these issues. So before welcoming our partners and friends from the Geneva Water Hub, from the World Meteorological Organization, from OECD, and from the European Commission for Europe of the United Nations, as well as UNESCO, who are the large international organizations that have been very involved in these topics, that have made us the honor and have been kind enough to share with us their visions on these questions. So we're now going to give the floor to our keynote experts within the International Water Office, the INBO Secretariat, Paul Haener, who's the head of the Water Information Systems, and he's going to be kicking off the debate. I'll give over to you, Paul. Thank you, Eric. I would like to share my screen right away. First of all, good morning to everyone. It is a real pleasure to meet you all on this new webinar on the information system. Today, the theme is to really exchange on how to strengthen the sharing and pooling of data produced by the multiple actors of the water sector. By way of introduction, I've chosen to look at two articles stemming from a water directive issued in 2019 on the open data in Europe. It is a water directive that was produced to favor a better access to data. at all European countries. And here it highlights two very important aspects. First of all, we are in a society that is looking at problem resolving, and the capacity to have data from different resources is likely to influence the life of citizens and improve their knowledge on this topic. And another important aspect enshrined in this directive is the capacity of smart and intelligent management. This data is likely to actually improve the economic information. So more specifically on the water-related data and information, data are absolutely fundamental for all activities of the water sector, both for sectoral water management, drinking water supply, irrigation, energy, etc., or integrated water sector planning, local level, basin level, national level, transboundary basins, or hydrological regime modifications, seawater level risking, or risk management at national or international level reporting, global reporting, or specific decision-taking on operation management, territory management, emergency situation. It is crucial at all levels to be able to access or organize the access to data and turn these data into tangible decision-making tools. So multiplicity of topics and data producers, not only it is necessary to have access to data on water resources as such, surface water or groundwater resources with all the monitoring quantitative and qualitative aspects, but it is critical to have the capacity to combine this information with, on one hand, all information on users and end users on infrastructure linked to users and infrastructure, but also take on board all environmental aspects, risk-related data, social economic aspects, and health indicators. So the ideal scenario and situation to organize the data sharing is to actually be able to take on board the fact that all these data are produced by several stakeholders, qualitative and quantitative data, but we can see that many data are also produced via satellites. It is therefore critical to be able to organize the data sharing between producers, users, and data managers. Therefore, the rationale that is actually kind of promoted for some time is the idea not to centralize, but rather create actors, networks that share their data. During the last seminar, we've organized an online poll, and we've had significant responses. Do you face issues to have, well, to a question, do you face issues for having access to data produced by various institutions? So 91% said yes. And then to the second question, in your opinion, what are the main difficulties limiting data sharing between institutions in your context? And 74% said the lack of national or cross-border data sharing strategy and agreements between actors. And it is indeed an organizational problem, setting up a strategy and agreement between partners. And then there are other reasons on the lack of references and tools and data production, but the problem of governance is absolutely a fundamental issue. All those elements on the organization of data management, as Eric highlighted, were synthesized in collaboration with UNESCO, the WMO, and the INBO Water and the BOMA Australia. And they're online in French, and you can download them in French and English, and they really bring together all the 5 main processes to be considered in terms of governance of water-related data management, and it really calls for data protection. It calls for shared and integrated data management, data processing and valorization, and also information, knowledge, and dissemination. And regardless of their application, these data sharing cannot work if we don't have a governance of information systems and organization of collaborations between institutions. Hence the idea of this new webinar to focus primarily on the theme of governance, with the idea and purpose to raise the attention of decision makers and actors involved in the water sector, and also to focus on the needs of reinforcing the water data management governance between players both at national and transboundary level, and also highlight that with the new technologies, there are a range of possibilities to build synergies and to pool resources and data protection between different stakeholders and actors. So this is why in the framework of this webinar, we have structured it in two parts. First, a roundtable of high level that will include high-level representative on the Geneva Water Hub, of the WMO, of the UNESCO, and the Niokhor Water Hub. It will be moderated by Berthelot from UNESCO. And the second part of the webinar will be a presentation by great witnesses and data sharing and data and case studies and resource pooling. Case studies from Mexico, from international, the European Environmental Agency. It will be moderated by Anaïs from OiEau Water. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Berthelot for the moderation of the first panel. Sorry, Mrs. Berthelot.
Autour d'un thème aussi majeur que le partage et la mutualisation des données dans le domaine de l'eau. Comme nous le savons tous, c'est un thème à l'importance croissante à mesure que les effets du changement climatique augmentent en intensité et en fréquence et que par conséquent la pression sur les ressources en eau s'accroît. Donc l'impératif de coopération dans le domaine de l'eau, dont un des leviers efficaces réside dans le partage et la mutualisation des données et des connaissances, comme on va le voir aujourd'hui. Donc cet impératif de coopération, il n'a jamais été aussi fort qu'aujourd'hui dans ce contexte de pression sur les ressources en eau. Et donc pour cet impératif de partage, il est aujourd'hui très important pour tendre vers une gouvernance de l'eau durable au niveau global. Et donc aujourd'hui, pour en témoigner et nous expliquer...
And today, the challenges that were in the sharing of water, and today we are present around this virtual round table. We have with us the representatives of the Ministry of Water and Sanitation of Senegal, of OECD, of the WWDI, the World Water Dam Initiative, and the World Meteorological Organization. So please feel free to place your questions in the chat in writing, and we as well as to whoever is being intended to, and to any speaker who would be able to cater for it. Now let's start with you, Mr. François Hissel. You are Geneva based, and we all know that the Geneva Water Hub is working in the field of hydro diplomacy. I would like you please to tell me how you started talking about these themes, and more chiefly, what are the reasons that led the GWH to engage itself in the sharing of data and digitalization. Thank you very much, Mr. Berthelot. My very dear colleagues and friends. Yes, I'm going to position myself on the why. The data are very important, and why digitalization is therefore important within the framework of water and peace. As you know, for many years, the World Economic Forum positions the water crisis among the most important major crises, and the professionals of water and the scientists are being alarmed as to the fact that water paucity and water rain with inefficient use is affecting more and more countries whose development is therefore being included. Water is a source of tension locally between water uses as well as between countries. This within the framework of a increase in geopolitical context, aggravated the overexploitation of natural resources, the demographic disparities, the extreme fragility of the regions and wars. An extreme fragility where very often the essential water-related services are non-existent or very, very deficient. However, water is also a powerful cooperation factor and instrument for peace. Several international treaties and conventions have been concluded to improve the cross-water management systems. The World Panel on, the High-Level Water and Peace Panel has produced its report in 2017. This report is the first analytical, structured reflection of the history on the challenges of water and peace. One of the 7 chapters of this report is focused on the importance of quantity and qualitative data. Now, the very acquisition and the sharing and the pooling of data on the water resources is indispensable for the implementation of the water-related policies, for cooperation, for investments, for security, for hydrodiplomacy, and for peace. As a matter of fact, the exchange and sharing of data on water within a framework of transparency and good governance are essential to establish conscience and foster perennial and sustainable socio-economic development and inclusive one, but also to manage the conflict uses, both transboundarily as well as locally. Now, to make the values available and to make a good operation thereof, we need on the one hand to cover, but also on the other hand to exceed the framework of hydrometeorological data in order to open it onto other economic and political actors, as well as to other fields and disciplines related to water, in diplomacy, in international law, in community development, in financing, and in climate change, quite obviously. As a matter of fact, the water-related data management, as water management suffers the piecemeal and the counter-performance and the underfinancing, under a sub-financing, which is a corollary of not being positioned as strategic tool for the implementation of strategies and financing plans. So therefore, we have to discriminate in favor of the intersectoral approaches, as well as polycentric instead of centralized top-down, past belonging that have, many of which have collapsed with the end of external financings. As the INBO highlights us in its manual, the water information system, it is therefore fundamental to define strategies and procedures to facilitate the mutualization of data produced by different actors while respecting the role of each and every one. Now, the digital platforms encourage a higher participation of the public through its participation in the production of data, outsourcing or crowdsourcing, but also for the crowdfunding. Now, the satellite data coupled to AI, artificial intelligence has already been mentioned, are not so onerous means, and these are accelerators of acquisition and treatment of data and processing of data that are important. But before anything else, the question of data must fit within the framework of the policies and be led by stable organizations whose activities in the field of water are close to operations that bears these policies, the policies that should include the management and the benefits of water, the large dams, but also lakes, and the river basins have a paramount role to that end. This is why I have the Geneva Water Hub and the Water Hub of Dakar coordinate a virtual panel of exchange between river basins and put a lay emphasis on the management of this initiative. Is launched by the G Water Hub and the ONVG, the Gambia Development River Authority, with the Blue Picks, including other partners, including the Swiss partnership, the CDC, UNCDF, the Geneva Water Hub. Also, we are participating, which fit within the framework of the development of an integrated future plan, master plan, which will also be an investment plan for investments. This is being done in partnership with several organizations of cross-border basins and the regional partners, as well as global basins, including the INBO, the WT, the WNB, etc. And also a manual is being prepared. Within the framework of this initiative, the ONVG and its 4 member states have launched at the beginning of this year an innovative projects to develop the integrated management and cross-valorization of data on the principles of subsidiarity and interoperability between the cross-border systems and national systems. It includes the joint development of a regional portal by a regional task group meeting virtually on a digital platform. This project will be presented by my friend, Secretary General of the OMVG, Mr. Abubakar Ndour, as a second phase of this webinar. The digital platforms, ladies and gentlemen, makes it possible to share data and to pool data are developing rapidly. For example, the river basin of the Tennessee River, which supplies water and energy to 10 million inhabitants in 7 states. Over and above its relevance in cybersecurity, has created a digital financial information platform, which is very important, and also an investment digital platform at the basin or river basin scale. The knowledge and the know-how and the Tennessee Valley Authority's experience will be exchanged within the framework of the initiative that I have hitherto mentioned. By way of conclusion, by simplifying and streamlining the management of water is being a critical challenge for century and for the human and for the future, which associated to the fragility causes conflicts. But the good governance of water resources is a cooperation and peace factor. We can only manage what we know of. The acquisition of management and data are a cornerstone of the good governance of water, and which are being impeded by the users and also suffering of not being part of the policies of financial development plan. The digitalization is a precious tool to overcome this fragmentation, which is paralyzing. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you, François, for this presentation, which will allow us, of course, does allow us to really put the right scope for our topic and to really understand the motivations and the rationale for the mutualization pooling of data. Without further ado, we are now going to have Mr. Ndour, with whom you are sharing your presentation, as you said, to talk to us about another field at the scale of a country very, very committed on the question of the data sharing, including the water courses of the Senegal River, cross-border management in Niokhor. We have heard with François Münger, of course, the reasons why you are committed on the topic of data sharing. And with you, could you please introduce to us concrete initiatives, hands-on initiative on this topic, the actions that you have implemented with the Ministry of Water and Sanitation of Senegal, of which you are the director, in order to share the data. So for the water resource management, efficient water resource management. Thank you very much, Mrs. Berthelot.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Mrs. Berthelot. And thanks to everyone and to my friend, François. We're talking about sharing, but thank you for François for sharing his time with me. Thank you very much. At OiEau, we're sharing data in my organization, and Paul has referred to it, and Eric too. In a practical way, in Senegal, the highest authority, be it at the president level and the minister level, I remember the member asked us to move towards a master plan of integrated integrated resources management. So we have to put all this in coherence and consistency, and we are working on it. The master plan has already been designed. And the GPRE with our partners, the International Water Agency organization, we are actually designing our database. We have all the other integrated databases. With the support of the International Water Organization, we are working to put all this in synergy and design and build synergy between all integrated systems and data sharing. And this is a work in progress. With the Geneva Water Hub, there is a very strong pillar of the GWH, innovation and knowledge, and we are actually working very hard to provide, we set up a center of resources based on digitalization of documents and also the networking of all the documentary data. And this is also work in progress, and I very much hope that in a couple of months down the road, down the road, we will be finalizing this program. An important aspect that you referred to earlier is primarily the governance of the data. And in the framework of the Water Code reform or revision, there is a specific chapter in Senegal on the information systems. And this shows how important this is. And if we manage to approve it and endorse it, it will unquestionably boost the governance and synergy on the water systems and water information systems. It is absolutely critical for the water sharing of data at national, regional data, because we have a lot of water sharing with other transboundary water sharing with other neighbors. As in other countries in Europe, there are information systems that are being put in place. And also at the Senegal River Basin Valorization Agency, we are working every day, namely at the DGPRE, the Directorate for Water Resources Management. We actually share that data with most of our partners. I hope I haven't been too long. I know we have very little time slot, but these are a range of macro initiatives that I wanted to share with you. And if we want to dwell into the details, we'll have further opportunities to focus more extensively on the tools that we're designing for a good governance and a good water sharing and a good governance of water resources. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ndour, for this presentation that has allowed us to understand the essence of our topic, and the importance of data sharing and pooling of resources is absolutely, and pooling of data produced by the multiple actors of water sectors helps us to actually set up indicators on the water governance. And I have the pleasure now to address to Mrs. Oriana Romano. Hi, Oriana.
Water governance through better data. Can you please explain to us this principle and how the OECD countries responded to this call for action? Oriana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maud, and thanks a lot for inviting the OECD to contribute to this very interesting debate. Thanks for the organization of this webinar. So to respond to your question, first of all, we started this debate around data, and in particular, this is reflected in a specific principles of the OECD principles on water governance. So we're talking about principle 5. For those who are not familiar with the OECD principles on water governance, these are 12 must-do for governments and stakeholders around what good governance would look like in terms of improving effectiveness, efficiency, and engagement and trust in relation to a series of governance dimensions, from clarifying roles and responsibility to enhancing capacity towards the very end of any water policy cycle that actually requires evaluation. So synthesizing what such a very complex concept like water governance into 12 principles inevitably also required a reflection on data. And I was mentioning this principle 5, on producing, updating, and sharing timely, consistent, comparable, and policy-relevant water and water-related data and information, and use it to guide, assess, and improve water policy. So, as you could see, that this is one of the principles that OECD and non-OECD countries together, and more than 200 stakeholders from the private, the public, and the non-for-profit sectors argue that it was very important to be included in what could be a good water governance system. And this starts from the principles that basically once one cannot improve what cannot be measured. So we insist on the importance not only of producing data, but also on sharing data. And perhaps in the next 2 minutes, I would like just to highlight 3 things. On the why it is important to share data, previous speakers have already highlighted some points, but I think it's important and taking into account the experience in different OECD countries, that sharing data can foster, first of all, dialogues across local, basin, regional and national levels of government, so they can promote discussion and build consensus across a range of different public authorities and stakeholders. And so it is very much needed in order to better manage the risk of too much, too little and too polluted water. Sharing data can stimulate the transparency on the performance of water management, but also water-related institutions, can also increase awareness on specific issues that otherwise would have not received the same attention. And so this means promoting capacity development and, of course, trigger actions to bridge water governance gaps. Now, the second point is beyond the why, and we know the importance of producing and sharing data, is what. We are talking about data, but it's not only about hydrological data. Economic, social, financial data are very much important to improve decision making, and we have seen several examples, for example, through the SDG 6 on water and sanitation, whereby there is a struggle in collecting water governance related data on integrated water resources management, financing, local participation and capacity building, but it is still a starting point to do so, and it is a very important one. Final point is how to share data, and we mentioned the governance of data. Indeed, there is an increasing trend towards digitalization and open data to promote results. There are some issues in relation though to be considered, for example, on the harmonization of data, standardization of data, coordination across levels of government, that of course still have to be dealt with, and we'll be happy to discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you, Oriana. So I think it was very clear on the importance of sharing, updating, and producing data and information. But there are many cases where this turns to be very difficult for the water stakeholders and data providers. So could you please tell us about which obstacles of sharing and pooling of data the stakeholders can meet? And what are the solutions that OECD is putting forward for them?
Sure, I was mentioning before that producing, collecting, and sharing data is not an easy task because of issues related to harmonization, standardization, and the coordination of data across relevant agencies and responsible authorities. So we have what we see in OECD, but also non-OECD countries, is very much a fragmentation of sources that and let's say increase the issues of comparability across available data. What I would like to highlight here in the 2 minutes I have, there are two things. That poor governance produces poor data, and vice versa. So on the one hand, there is a lack of data that might hinder the identification of gap and the measurement of progress years after years. So when we talk about the frequency and how much regularly these data are updated and shared. But generating data may also favor good governance, as data can spot problems, create incentives for changes, and can trigger changes. On the other hand, to be able to inform a decision-making, data should be clear, should be available, and in most of the cases, or in some of the cases, there is also a risk of obtaining data rich information, but poor indicators. So it's more about the availability of data rather than the objective we want to reach. So this is an important thing to take into account. And the second obstacle that I would like to highlight is the fact that it is important to coordinate across levels of government because in many cases we see that there are national statistics, for example, for data, open data at national level, but it is important also to take into account what happened at subnational level, at city level, local level, basin level, because it's there that you can see really the differences across different places. And so in having this data available and sharing them can really provide the place-based responses to those. At the OECD, to conclude, we have developed something that we saw was missing within the water governance initiative, and thanks to the members of the work of the water governance initiative, the OECD water governance indicator framework. So these are a set of indicators that highlight where and if governance condition for the governance of data, and in particular indicators related to the principle 5 that I mentioned, exist or should be improved. These indicators on data are related first to the analysis of the water information system, but also on who is doing what in terms of data collection, production, and sharing, and how, if the existence and the level of implementation of mechanisms to identify and review data gaps are in place or not at different levels of government.
Thank you very much, Oriana, for this explanation. And now let's see what another international organization is doing for our topic. And I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Dominique Berod from the World Meteorological Organization. So Mr. Berod, we all say that it's important to share data for water management and water policy. And we all know that there are barriers at different levels that hamper this sharing. And as Oriana just very well described to us. So in the opposite, could you please give us your perspective from WMO point of view on the best incentive for effectively sharing water data?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. So simply said, I would mention...
Merci également.
Sharing data, you contribute to better flood and drought forecasts. When sharing data, you make monitoring systems more effective. When sharing data, you increase the visibility as a data providers. So let me elaborate a little bit. So we know that natural hydrological processes are still unknown, and societies are facing more and more interconnected challenges with climate, economy, demography, etc. So we can try to model those systems, but without monitoring, without data, we are blind. So progress in the exploration of hydrological cycle requires more than point dot measurements. We did a kind of holistic approach of the Earth system, and therefore we need an intensified data sharing among all stakeholders. And this allows an improvement of numerical hydrometeorological predictions, forecasts, and better climate outlooks. So we know monitoring can be very expensive, but it's now supported by very different data sources: satellite, citizen observation, Internet of Things, big data, name it. So data sharing allows a better cross-validation of those new data type, and thus a higher quality of information, and that's what we want in the end. And in some cases, it avoids building new monitoring stations because there is existing station, existing system. If we can share data, we can spare costs. And if the data are used by multiple times, by multiple communities with multiple benefits. So think of disaster reductions, hydropower, agriculture, navigations, ecosystems, etc. So monitoring systems will have then a much better return of investment. So in addition, and that's my last point, so data providers having a large audience will become more visible. And I think that has been addressed right before. And they are indeed identified as a trusted partner. And thus, with better forecast, better information, and budget secured and effectively used by sharing data.
Thank you, Dominique. And to go further, in parallel to that incentive you mentioned, can you explain how is WMO supporting these data providers to overcome barriers to data sharing?
Yeah, thank you. So I would say we are working at 3 complementary levels: policy and funding, IT solution and standards, and development of data products. So on policy and advocacy, we are working as WMO community on a new unified data policy that is just endorsed by the Intergovernmental Commission for Observation, Infrastructures and Information Systems, we call that INFCOM, last April, and by the WMO Executive Council this week, last Tuesday, and it will be submitted to the WMO Congress in October. So a new unified data policy. On this policy, we will support countries in their own developments of open data systems on the whole point of governance we were addressing before. And in addition, WMO is exploring new models for funding not only investment, but as well operation and maintenance of monitoring systems. And doing this, we are liaising with major donors, bilateral, multilateral donors to support countries on data providers. And eventually on that point, WMO is leading the World Water Data Initiative, which is dedicated to data policy and advocacy for water monitoring system and including the whole point of governance mentioned by Paula and others. And the current focus we have on that project is on a kind of new mechanism for user requirements to really understand what end users need from information and from data, and working as well on a system for a kind of quantification of value of information, the value of the data, what are the benefits of the data for decision makers. So that's one point. And the second is the support we are offering on data sharing with IT solutions. So information systems. On the one we are developing is called the WHOS, the World Hydrological Observing System. It's a discovery and brokering system that make data visible and easy usable on things like consistent, adaptable system, agile system from data collections to data products. And that include standardized data format, making data interoperable. And that was mentioned in the talk before. So we have to make sure that data can talk together. And we just launched one region, being in the Arctic region of that WHOS, and we'll be opening soon another one on La Plata in South America, and open for any other needs we have around the world. And by the way, a global portal is under construction as well. And we are providing the system and we are providing training, not only on that specific WHOS, but generally speaking on hydrological data sharing. And we will start those training later this year. And as for the data products, so we are developing what we call the HydroSOS. It's for hydrological status and outlook system, and developing hydrological information products based on all the data that are available, and products at global, regional, and national level, informing on the current situation of hydrology. Are they drought? Are they droughts? Are they flood events somewhere? And then what will be the expected evolutions in the coming days, coming weeks, coming months at a sub-seasonal scale? And that will allow countries to gain again visibility, thanks share data, having good products, and then showing the benefit of all of these. And those kind of initiative is as well connected to capacity building. On final word at this stage, so all those initiatives are here to support WMO members and partners, and I'm happy to engage with all of you, and especially now that WMO is preparing an action plan for operational hydrology, and we are spearheading the development of water information system within the Coalition for Water and Climate, supporting the SDG 6 accelerator on water. And I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dominique. And now, as time is running out, let's move on to our last but not least speaker. And I'm happy to welcome Mrs. Sonja Koeppel from UNEC, the United Nations Economic Commission from Europe. UNEC, among many other things, has promoted shared data management policies and for transboundary basin authorities and other data provider. Ms. Koeppel, can you please explain the added value of sharing information and data at the transboundary level?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation to this event. I'm Sonja Koeppel, currently the Secretary of the Water Convention, which is hosted by UNEC, but which is now a global legal and intergovernmental framework for transboundary cooperation. So as most of you know, indeed, more than 60% of global freshwater flows in transboundary basins. And sharing data across borders is needed to form a comprehensive picture of the situation in the basin, but also to provide a better basis for planning and better understanding of the risks. As some of my predecessors have said, it helps to guide management efforts, to accurately identify the pressure sources, to verify also the effectiveness of measures taken. It can also actually, in an ideal world, lead to an increased efficiency in allocating funds and provides evidence for intersectoral cooperation and transboundary dialogue, such as with the agriculture or energy sectors. And as we know, in transboundary basins, actually data sharing is sometimes, or even in several cases, the first step for starting cooperation, and it can promote trust and bring benefits in terms of peace, sustainable development, and environmental protection. However, it is also still one of the main stumbling blocks for transboundary cooperation. For all these reasons, data exchange, a regular exchange of data, was actually included into the indicator, SDG indicator 6.5.2, which measures the progress of transboundary water cooperation worldwide. And this, together with 4 other criteria, which are that countries need to annually exchange data and information. They need to have a joint body, so a basin organization, for example. Then the countries need to regularly meet in the shared basin and have joint objectives or a joint plan for the management of the basin. So this indeed shows the importance of data exchange. And UNEC and UNESCO are the custodian agencies for this indicator at the global level. And we have just, we're just about to finalize the second reporting exercise on this indicator, and that shows the high commitment of countries, because 129 out of the 153 countries sharing transboundary waters have actually reported. And I think on the one hand there are some good news. The good news is that actually 86% of the agreements reported in this reporting include data collection and data exchange. So this is, and that also most basin organizations are dealing with data exchange as one of their main tasks. And this is also happening in informal forms of cooperation as well as in the more formal ones. However, the reporting also shows that actually more than half of the countries indicate clear difficulties in data and information exchange, and 73 countries indicate lack of relevant data and information. With regards to what are these main difficulties and challenges reported upon? Actually, the largest difficulty is comparability of data and information across countries in the basins, because the national systems follow different standards and so on and so forth. And the second biggest challenge reported is lack of resources. And this, I think, has already been mentioned by several of my predecessors, that more needs to be done to allocate sufficient resources for this topic. Secondly, what are the main areas or subjects upon which information and data are exchanged or actually are not exchanged? Let's look at this. And I can say that lack of information exchange is mainly the case for flow of water levels, and particularly for groundwater. As well as, according to the reporting, also there's lack of information exchange on, or lower information exchange on emission monitoring data, and also on diffuse pollution sources. And finally, to conclude, I would like to underline that the biggest challenge is certainly lack of data and lack of data exchange on groundwater and aquifers, where certainly, as we all know, there's even lack of information so far on the delineation of aquifers, and even more so on any other aspects. So much more to be done in the years to come.
Thank you. And actually, we read last week that Guinea-Bissau became the 4th African country and the 45th party to accede to the Water Convention, whose secretariat is provided by UNESCO. So even if its accession is not directly related to data sharing, Sonja, could you please explain like what it will offer or how it will impact Guinea-Bissau in the future in the field of data, to be part of this convention, maybe by precising the role of this convention in fostering data exchange and monitoring and pooling data. Very quickly if possible, because we are lagging out of time.
Okay, thank you. Indeed, Guinea-Bissau submitted last week its instrument of accession in New York to the Water Convention, and the Water Convention actually has a large part of obligations on data exchange, on monitoring and assessment, both in its part 1, which is about national obligation, and well as in the part 2, which is about transboundary cooperation. And the Water Convention has therefore from the beginning on actually supported countries in addressing the challenges related to data exchange and so on and so forth, by setting up a working group on monitoring and assessment already more than 20 years ago, by then creating an international water assessment center, which is currently hosted in Kazakhstan, by also carrying out pilot projects and such as currently together with Geneva Water Hub and several other actors, some of which are present here, on the Senegal Aquifer Basin. And then also the convention is developing actually guidance material on different topics, such as the strategies for monitoring and assessment of transboundary rivers, lakes and groundwaters, but also more technical guidance on monitoring of groundwaters, of surface waters, of lakes, and so on. This work has led to several lessons learned. I would say first, the monitoring and data exchange systems really also need to be adapted to the needs of the countries and also to the resources available in the basin. Because if one sets up a very sophisticated monitoring system which cannot be sustained in the longer term, this may be a problem. So it's important to follow a step-by-step approach in the monitoring and data exchange, etc. Secondly, data harmonization is still a big issue, as I said. And thirdly, more funding needs to be dedicated to this topic. And I think it's encouraging to see that several international financial institutions are starting to invest in this topic, such as also the World Bank or such as some others, but much more is still needed and needs to be done. And I would also say that it's very positive that we have now innovative systems such as remote sensing and others. However, this will not be enough. And in shared basins, we still need the effective legal and institutional frameworks for transboundary cooperation. So for all these reasons, in the future program of work of the Water Convention to be adopted at the upcoming meeting of the parties at the end of September this year, to which I all invite you to take part, that will include an increased focus actually on the topic of monitoring and data information exchange. And that will include, for example, foresees updating of the strategies on monitoring and assessment, which I mentioned earlier. Also the organization of several training and regional workshops. Also, we are planning to develop and collect with many of you, hopefully here, including INBO and others, to develop a good practice and lessons learned collection on data exchange. And finally, to provide tailored assistance for some basins which needed, such as the DRIN, such as the Senegal monitoring aquifer I mentioned earlier, depending on the needs and requests from the basins. And yeah, with this, I would like to thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Koeppel. So I think now we can move on to our question and answer session for our remaining 9 minutes. So I'm looking in the chat at a question from the registration form asked by Mr. Carlos Sabrera from GIZ. So Mr. Sabrera is asking about the success factors for an open integrated water resources information system at national, subnational, and a river basin level in data scarce countries. So, dear panelists, the floor is yours. If anyone of you would like to answer that question. Maybe Paul or Oriana.
Oui, donc,
okay.
Yes, I will try and answer quickly this global question. Several information have already been mentioned. Thank you for the exchange of information. I think this issue of data integration requires the taking into account of several factors. Our experience during the last 25 years in different countries and international context is that more and more so the technical aspects are not really the problems. The problems have to do with organization and governance related problems. There is first an institutional framework to be set up. Consider the information systems are being decision making and decision dissemination tools that have to be part of a specific framework. The institutional framework is very important, grounded on a networking of the different actors for the identification of needs and the setup of rules of sharing within which, and we will see that in the following example, within which one of the fundamental rules that have been mentioned is the principle of subsidiarity. That is to say, we are supporting ourselves and the producers while leaving the data to be used by the users. And we're going to use the existing information system by networking the players with the stakeholders. Second dimension is also important, which is also important, is the technical aspect, but with it being understood that we now need to use the modern tools and the interoperability aspects, the APIs, the web service that also make it possible for the information system to communicate between themselves automatically once the rules of governance have been set up. A third dimension on which I'd like to also dwell is the necessity, once we have accessed the data, is to have the capacity to transform these data into information that be useful for decision making by the stakeholders. So there is a whole know-how that we have to really put in into profit to turn this into information. I really wanted to dwell on these three: information governance with the rules and the technical aspects of interoperability and the web services and the valorization tools, as well as the notions of trade-related knowledge or field-related. Donc, si je puis
about the first element on governance of data information system, if that's okay. So there are 5 elements that we think they're important for this kind of integrated and open information system. First, to define requirements for cost-effective and sustainable production and methods for sharing high quality water and water related data information. As I said, it is about the status of water resources, but we have to take into account data in terms of financing, environmental needs, socioeconomic features, and also institutional mapping. The second point is to foster effective coordination and experience sharing among agencies producing water-related data, so also between data producers and users and across levels of government. The third governance dimension is to promote engagement with stakeholders in the design and implementation of water information system and provide guidance on how this kind of information should be shared to foster transparency. The fourth is encouraging the design of harmonized and consistent information sharing at different scales, of course, including the basin scales or the case of transboundary water, as we were mentioning, to foster mutual confidence, reciprocity, and comparability across framework. And then the fifth governance point in relation to that information system is to review this data collection, use and sharing and dissemination to identify overlaps or synergies and track also unnecessarily data overload. When it comes to the data scarce situation, as Carlos was mentioning in his questions, is very much also a question on capacity building. So taking into account all this process from designing the system, coordinating across levels of government, engaging with stakeholders, encouraging the design of harmonized data and reviewing the data collection are all phases that requires building specific skills and capacity, but also exchanging experiences across different agencies that could represent sources of data at different levels.
Merci, Oriana.
Thank you, Oriana. And with this answer, I think we are now bringing to an end the session of Q's and A's to now fork onto the second panel. Time is of the essence, and I will now going to invite the panelists to respond in the chat to the answers that were raised to them, and maybe also the questions raised by other participants. And I would like to invite the other participants to also mail their questions to the speakers who would be able to respond by mail. Thank you for everyone for your presentations and for having shown a spot. Thank you for the interpreters also. Thank you for the INBO for the good preparation. It was a real delight for me to moderate and to facilitate this first phase of the webinar with UNESCO and the IHP. We are highly committed on this very topic of sharing and pooling of data in the field of water, as we have been able to do through our water information, the PHE wings, as well as on initiative, just like the potential conflict or conflicts of cooperation, to mention but these two examples. I'm going to stop at this level, but thanking each and everyone, and I'm happy to give the floor to Anaïs Charbonnier for the resumption of the second phase of our webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Maud. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charbonnier Anaïs. I am a project leader at the River Basin Organization. First, I'm keen on thank the speakers of the first roundtable panel discussion for their sterling presentation that allowed, of course, to really set the, understand the different challenges and the challenges that have to do with the sharing of data.
Avec le témoignage donc, des acteurs qui partageront leur expérience professionnelle sur la mutualisation des données. Et je vais donc céder la parole à M. François Hissel, qui est directeur de la surveillance, de l'évaluation et des données au sein de l'Office français de la biodiversité. M. François Hissel, pourriez-vous illustrer par une étude de cas comment les données peuvent être collectées à travers le système national d'information pour améliorer l'efficience de la politique de l'eau? La parole est à vous.
Oui, merci Anaïs. Alors je vais partager mon écran.
Thank you, Anaïs. I'm now going to share my screen. My name is François Hissel, the Director of Data at the French Biodiversity Office. Just a word on OFB. We are a parastatal under the ministry, the French Ministry in charge of ecology, with 4 main missions. On the one hand, the water and nature police. We have 1,700 agents who are wandering the different water courses and who would also take note of any violations. Second, mobilization of civil society organizations in order to initiate transforming biodiversity loving initiatives. And finally, the knowledge of water and biodiversity, which includes the coordination of national information system and waters on marine, media, and biodiversity. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. Now, leading public policies without data, I think it's as though you were to go to the heart of Iceland for a trekking without map and without friend, far in the cold out there. And it's even truer for the environmental policies that have to do with ecosystems that are always interacting. So therefore, we have 2 major objectives for data for the public powers. So once, to understand the reality, the ecosystems and their impacts on the evolution, and this is the objective of indicators just like the ones represented to the left-hand side on the state of conservation of habitats and species, or the perception that the French have on the challenges of biodiversity. And more directly, this data also makes it possible to implement and evaluate public policies. To the right-hand side, examples of indicators of the like are given to us on the knowledge of the present species, on nature, or the strong management indicators for follow-up, monitoring, and evaluation of public policies. But to produce these very synthetic indicators that I've chosen to, this presupposes to use very, very piecemeal or scattered data. So every small circle is a database or an organization that participates in the production of these indicators, of which I've talked right now, in ministries, in territorial collectivities, NGOs, naturalist organizations, benevolent and volunteers. All of those persons are working on their tools, standards, and ways of collecting information. If we remain idle, it would be difficult to reach information that would be comparable. Now, to meet this question, the OFB has set up in the French Ministry state federating information system 3 exist, one water, one on the biodiversity and marine media, whose governance and architecture are enshrined in the regulatory enactment. So this is general architecture tree of the water system. We have noted that there are, through the French Environment Code, about 10 or so major public policies relating to water and aquatic media, and these public policies tend to work in silos, all produce and use data, be it on sanitation, on swell, forecast, police, as well as wet media, and hence it is very important and interesting that these information are being shared freely. And of course, OFB does not require all of these data to be under one roof. Much to the contrary, we really work in the form of subsidiarities. We know the legitimacy of each leader, bearer of public policies to manage, produce, process these data. But on the other hand, we will set up a technical reference or benchmark to guarantee the data are being homogeneous, interoperable, and of quality. And to attract also the public policies managers to comply with this reference-based or benchmark, we also offer a digital framework that make it possible to have shared almanach, shared bricks of information system of public policies. Now, this slide before you does recall everyone that for any information system, the information system of water is based on 3 pillars: a technological one, an organization-related one, and one mostly related to governance. For the IS on water, it includes also the highest authorities of water in order to make sure that everyone is going to the same direction. I've talked about the referential benchmark. This is the very core and heart of the water information system. It is comprised of 2 major parts: a reference base of data with dictionaries, with data references of protocols that describe how the data are being collected on the field to guarantee certain homogeneity between the different producers of data. Thanks to the water information system, the OFB today is capable of disseminating several billions of data on many several fields: quantity of water, ground or underground, surface water, related data, and also the collection of water, the measures of restoration and rehabilitation of water courses. For that, we have set up a portal that makes it possible to have open source, very synthetic sites, or for the non-laymen, for the professionals, but also digital services. This is something that has been working with APIs for the third parties also to also develop application. We have 23 queries per second on these digital services. Likewise, we also have Minima France and Nature France portals that are the shop windows of information system on biodiversity, on as well as marine media. I wanted to give you an example of benefits of sharing data at the National Database of Pesticide Sales. Now, the sale of pesticides in French is conditioned to financial data that we get from the National Bank for the approved distributors of phyto products that allows us to know the use of pesticides, to assess a major policy for the reduction of pesticides in France, makes it also possible to establish research between pesticides use and biodiversity of hedaphic areas or soil-related areas. So it is shared, but still a long way remains to be made here, including a challenge that we have been able to identify. We know the status of the media, but we need to really know more the pressure, the uses and the answers there too. This is still terra incognita, and we have a lot of shortfalls on that. And also we need to really increase and ramp up the interoperability that we have over and above our frontiers. And there's also a choice of innovation, better capture the connected factors, the IoT, the IA, the artificial AI, and artificial intelligence, and what would the knowledge of tomorrow be? There, we need also to capitalize on the environmental aspects. We are pushing the investors and the users to also invest. We're talking now about data obesity or info obesity. Now we, of course, to really separate the good from the chaff and to really focus on the most synthetic and operational activities. Thank you for your very kind attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Hissel, for this presentation that really goes to highlight the importance of shared data indicators to define and implement and assess the public policies, but also to guarantee equity, the transparency for citizens. And we all know the commitment of OFB, the French Biodiversity Organization, and we know, of course, our office, and we know, of course, how to include that. Without further ado, I'm going now to shift to Spanish.
Now we're going to change, we're going over, and I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Juan José Díaz Nigenda from the National System of Water Information, part of the National Water Commission, Conagua, in Mexico. Mr. Juan José, what would the mechanisms be for the implementation and the reinforcement of the national water system? Thank you. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the National Water Commission and the Water Planning Conference, I would like to thank you all for your invitation. We are going to talk about the National Information System for water that we have in place as part of the Water Commission, and that helps decision making. Before I start, I would like to say that the Water Commission, the Water National Commission, is an instrument that helps the management of water resources in Mexico. In order to implement it, we developed a number of processes. These are basically 5, and we cover from the collection of data to the delivery and dissemination of such information created by the National Water Commission and several different bodies involved in water management in Mexico. So the National Water Information System provides information to support decision-making and also to follow up the different policies, the public policies in Mexico. As part of this framework, within the National Water Commission, we have different principles, so to speak, or mechanisms that help the implementation of the National Water Information System. One of the standard framework for which we implemented the Water National Information System based on a number of criteria and principles that are given by our constitution as part of the National Statistic and Geographical Information System led and managed by the National Statistics Institute, run by the Mexican government. So as the Water National Commission and the National Information System, we lead one of the technical committees specialized in water, and together with the rest of the stakeholders, we do the follow-up and monitoring, and we improve the generation of data for the different administration units of the Mexican government. Another standard we have in place is the actual water policies. Article 9 says that we need to implement the National Water Information System. So the legal framework, I believe, is really important. And another very important part of it for the management of information in Mexico is what is said by the National Water Program for the current administration, 2020-2024. As part of the National Water Program, there is an objective for water management that establishes a strategy and certain points and actions that indicates that we need to improve the functioning and ensure access of all the citizens in order to support decision-making and supervision and monitoring of the situation in the different areas. So another important point of the National Water Information System is a point for consultation and dissemination of water resources in Mexico, for which we gather information from different systems, from different areas as part of CONAGUA and other offices, governmental offices and agencies, and we implement, we bring together the information through different sources, different archives, and we manage a database centrally. And then, after analyzing the data and the information available, we made it available for both end users to organizations through different reports, and through an iconic publication, which is the water statistics in Mexico. As Paulo said earlier, we have been implementing these statistics for more than 20 years now, and that is also something that we must recognize. As part of this process, we have identified very many systems, as another speaker also mentioned earlier. We identified around 19 portals and information systems that provide data and information on water resources. So what we are doing also is to identify those and to upload them to the National Water Information System so that they are located in one single area, one central access point. And another point that is also important is the fact that we have a dissemination means for the National Information for Water. We have a platform, an online platform that provides information on several issues related to water management, from the quality of the water, from the status of the different water sources, economical information, and so on and so forth. And we also update the data annually on the system, and we also have a specific module for companies, for businesses, where we provide daily information on different dams across the country. So this has also helped a great deal in improving our processes within CONAGUA. And as I mentioned earlier, last year, we were assessed based on a transparency index for natural resources promoted by civil society organizations. And this led us to improve our systems internally and to align them into a single access point for the public. So we created a portal, an information portal, that brings together all those 19 portals and systems I mentioned before, which will then be integrated into the information water system, to the water information system rather. This platform, well, we are bringing the National Water Information System to a new version. We are updating to version 3.0, and this is provided by the National Institute of Geography, and we want to reinforce the functionality through visualization, consultation, and analysis of the data and information, and we also want to improve the interoperability principles, scalability, and information availability. This for both the Mexican government and for general access. And finally, we believe in my institution that we can have a great deal of information in our system, but unless we apply it, I think this investment will come to no avail. So the National Water Information System provides information on decision-making and on the integration of the National Water Program, as well as on the regional water programs. The SENA further has a monitoring system for the indicators that are part of the National Water Program and also the sustainable goals, particularly number 6. Thank you.
Anaïs, ton micro, s'il te plaît.
Disculpa. Muchas gracias, señor Juan José.
Thank you very much, Juan José, for your presentation about the National Information System. It clearly improves governance systems in your country. It helps decision-making processes more efficient. Thank you so much.
We're going to switch right away with the presentation of a transboundary organization. I will give the floor with no further ado to the Secretary General to the Organization for the Development of the Gambia River Basin, OMVG, Mr. Ababakar Ndour. Can you tell us, sir, how the organization of the data sharing can improve the daily life and development of your region? Thank you very much.
This is Charbonnier. Thank you very much. My also thanks go to the INBO and to all the partners who facilitated the organization of this webinar on data exchange, which is of utmost importance. Thank you to the General Waters, to the INBO, to UNESCO and all of the other partners. My name is Ababakar Ndour, the Secretary General of the Organization for the Development of the Gambia River, OMVG. But before continuing on, I would like and also commend UNESCO to Mrs. Sonja, Koeppel, for the introduction of Guinea-Bissau, which is a member state of OMVG, the Organization for the Development of the Gambia River. I think this is a major breakthrough for Guinea-Bissau, but it's also good for the convention/treaty. I'm going now to entertain you on the integrated management of data with respect to the OMVG River. I sent you a presentation, if you could also screen share it. Now, what's OMVG? I think everyone knows what the Organization for the Development of the Gambia River, OMVG, is. But to define it, this is a four-state concluded organization. This is the willingness of these states that created the OMVG, the Gambia River Development Organization. These states are the Gambia, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, and Senegal. It is important to pinpoint on that because earlier we were talking about exchanges, and it's very important to acknowledge these are 4 states who decided to together, who have entered into agreements to create the OMVG, whose mission statement is the development of the Gambia River, because the name is self-explanatory, but also of 2 other river basins, Kayanje, Jeba, and Koeppel. So it has that very feature of also to take also good care of 3 river basins. Also another one of our features is really coming out from what I've said earlier, but also we could also pinpoint the fact that with these 4 states, there are 3 languages being used, if not 3 other different administrative systems, quite different. We're talking about Senegal and Guinea, and which are different than the classical French, that are really similar or likened to the French classical system, which they draw from the French inspiration, but also the Gambia also draws inspiration from the Anglo-Saxon countries and also from the Portuguese inspiration is the Guinea-Bissau. So these are therefore several challenges ahead of us. Now our mission is to work for the development of this river. Up until now, this development of the river has addressed more global question in terms of infrastructures, major infrastructures, dams, and also interconnection systems of lines, sea lanes. In terms of data, so it was relatively simple to a certain extent because the main data of input nature are often hydrological nature. It is the basis indeed, but the studies have also made it possible to collect some economic data on electricity. It was a little different, but simpler. But today, in view of the challenges and owing to our wish to better meet with the mission, which is our for development and the valorization that has been invested into us, whereby we would like to allow the populations, the riverside populations to improve their living conditions and to contribute to their sustainable development. All this has led us to decide to readjust our actions and to so much so that we are now with the support of partners that I would like to thank in passing that are around the table, the Swiss cooperation, the Geneva Water Hub, as well with UNICEF, who've helped us. We have set up the integrated master plan. So now these data, which will be aggregated, condensed, which are over and above the simply hydrological or simply sector-based data that are going to be socioeconomic data. We will also have data pertaining to the environment. And this also multiplies the number of stakeholders or players who will be sought after to produce these data in the states, because these are going to be data to be collected locally, nationally, and at our level also through studies being led, but also at the international level. We will certainly need to know what breakthroughs and advances have been made on that terrain too. The opportunities also that we have available to us with respect to that is, as some have already said, the opportunity lies in the fact that the states that define the program that we have to lead, who have ratified it, have acquired a greater use thanks to the support of the states, and that the structures in these states cooperate and do accept the use of these mechanisms and the exchange of data, which is necessary to be able to implement the programs that we caress the ambition to implement. That's first. Second is that also today we can avail of the use of ICTs, information communication technologies. So far, the number of data we are going to handle is quite vast and diversified. These data are collected in a standard manner every day, everywhere, but technologies and ICTs today make it possible, everything through digitalization, digital processing, to be able to settle these questions and to be able to make much more transparent and legible the exchange and the management of such data. Regarding this last aspect, we have initiated with the OiEau, under the impulse of the Geneva Water Hub and the Swiss cooperation, we have initiated a project to implement a platform towards the management and sharing of data. So this is something that is now being developed since January. These data, as I said, we do need them for the implementation of our project, for the economic development of the states, and we also have that diversity of production and levels of production. On the financial, with the assistance of INBO, we are setting up in place this platform. And for the time being, you can see the picture that you have here that illustrates the complexity of the situation and mostly the central role that OMVG must discharge, all of which is implemented. Because most data, as we've said, are state or state structure level produced. These are data that are often input data for OMVG that processes them and that turns them into products that are available for other states. Please, next slide. So, what are we going to produce? Interesting is the fact, at the outset to say, is that in this assistance that we have with OiEau, the French Office of Water, since the production of data hail from everywhere, we'd like to make all this interoperable so that everyone be able to avail thereof, and by producing, this time around, by producing a value added that would prove interesting, not only for the OMVG's expectations, but also for the expectations of our countries and the public use. So the screen shows here these kinds or types of products. We would like to have a dissemination portal with web services, interactive maps, with also the visualization and localization of all these, and maps also of indicators of data, and also to other products that are available, if not will be available, to all of the partners, and bulletins, documents, training supports, and media. It is very important that these data exchange be able to make the added value more legible, visible, and usable. And also something else, in this example, with the use of the means made available to us, there are technologies that are being available. So we also are using these data more automatically, because it's something to be able to have access to data in real time. But the challenge here is that the system must work all the time and must also integrate everything that is being related to the capturing and improvement of new datums or data. So these are also products that we have already. We have hydrological stations or monitoring stations, not to mention also other products that we are about to roll out. These are products that we are going to roll out very quickly because these are already available products. But as I said earlier, socioeconomic related data, environmental related data that we have to have within reach in order to allow the integrated development plan to really go and thrive, is also to have environmental indicators, and socio-economic indicators must also be at hand. Now still, we have some allocations here that we can draw from this system. As we all know, these data that we need are produced at different levels by different stakeholders. We are working on 4 countries, and at the scale of each country, we also have, it goes from the international, the local to the national, and us as OMVG2, we do produce data, but also we would like to also have access to data at the international level to really finalize the use that we have been entrusted. The use of ICTs also make it possible to integrate and to increase the value of the data available automatically. I was talking earlier about interoperability. Also, a good collaboration is indispensable with the states and the national organizations to implement the interoperability process. I would say that we have here an institutional framework which is quite favorable, and since we are working for the furtherance of the state's interests, and that is very important. This collaboration must continue. It's a given, but we have to really kind of nurture it as we go ahead. Now, the experience led on the pilot projects of OiEau does not create any additional work for these partners, because if our system had to lead to increasing the burden of work of these producers of the database, that would be a little more complicated. No. It is a system that makes it possible to use the data available and to also turn it into an added value on fronts on which they really concur. In other words, what we do is undertake projects. I mentioned projects for structuring development that are at the service of the countries, but also this integrated master plan development system is a plan that really seeks to meet the needs of the grassroots populations in the 4 countries, hence the states. It is in the state's interest to fully cooperate towards the implementation of such platforms and data sharing networks that we are developing. This is what I wanted to share with you, and it being understood that, of course, we'll remain ready, will be able to answer whatever questions you may have. And I would finish with thanking all of our partners who have been supporting us in our works that we are now discharging. And maybe later also, if I may propose OMVG as an example to be used for other river basins to show that it is possible to really work in a structured manner and to also meet with the local grassroots population's needs, which are needs that are being differently expressed, including the needs to access socioeconomic services, but also to employment, to labor, and to all other possibilities, so that the spaces around the river basins would be places where it is nice to live and work at. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Mr. Aboubakar.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Cet exemple qui illustre la façon dont une bonne collaboration entre les États, mais aussi les organismes nationaux et
Thank you very
internationaux.
much for referring to this very important mechanism requiring national and international organizations.
Now, I would like to
Je souhaiterais
last speaker, Mr. Nihat Zal, who is project manager for water resource, water scarcity and drought into the European Environment Agency. Please, sir, could you present the system that has been established in Europe for data sharing and the principal structuring? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me and hear me. And greetings from Copenhagen. So let me just start with a short introduction on the European Environment Agency for those that who has not been in contact with the European Environment Agency so far. So European Environment Agency is an EU institution located in Copenhagen, Denmark, and is a knowledge hub and knowledge provider to the European environmental agenda. And it's also hosting quite a number of environmental data and information. So being as a last speaker, of course, itself is challenging. I will try to be very quick with my short presentation. I have only 3 slides. And actually, the needs and the essentials around the data collections and processing and information production have already been highlighted and addressed by the previous speakers. So I'm going just to explain you with a few slides about the key principles around the information system from the European perspective that we call these as the shared environmental information system. I'm going to share my screen with you. Please just let me know in the case that you can see my screen. Yes, thank you very much. And I hope the presentation would be available. Yes, I think so. Great. So the shared environmental information system is a very famous name, which was established by the European Commission in 2008. I get some noise in the background. I don't know how I can manage with this, but Eduardo, the voice is coming from you, sorry. That was exactly this as a means of solutions to collecting the data and information from the European countries to address the common environmental challenges and issues. Since then, the shared environmental information system became a collaborative platform and initiative between the European Commission and also the European Environment Agency, and also its member countries, which is called as the IONET member countries, where we have 38, actually 32 member countries and 6 cooperating countries from the West Balkans. And the overall objective of having such an information platform is, of course, on one hand, to facilitate the collection of the data on the various environmental topics and issues from the member countries, and also to facilitate the exchange and sharing the environmental information and data across Europe. This is really, really essential when we are addressing the environmental issues from the European perspective. And so far, it has already become an integrated and web-enabled platform, and it's really growing up quite fast. And it has already accommodated a lot of modernization processes. And so the key and the door to the gateway to this information system is called as ReportNet. And right now we are about running the ReportNet 3. So this is the version that's using more the digitalization tools to enable the fast data collection and processing from the European countries. I would like a little bit highlight the key principles around the sharing the knowledge, sharing the data and information across Europe and among the IONET member countries. And this is quite essential when you are designing and developing such an information system at the international level. So one of the basic principles is exactly to consider the managing of the data as close as possible to its source. So that means that the interoperability has to be solved at the source rather than at the platform, at the international platform where we are collecting the data. So in Europe, we are doing this by means of the common data dictionary on different thematic areas, including water. So every reporter from the countries should design the data in line with this data dictionary before reporting the data to the environmental information system. And of course, once you collect the data, this data could be used for many purposes. So this is quite key. So in the case that we are collecting the data on the water abstraction, this is not only about developing one type of indicator, but this is the type of information that you can use for many purposes, like addressing to the pressure of economic sectors on the water resources. and the data should be publicly available. So this is key. So everyone that's reporting the data to the system, or any public or any individual, should access to this data in a very easy means and tools, so that you can really share your knowledge, your data and information with the wider public, and then also you can also collect the feedback from the users. And this data should be also accessible at various geographical scales, so that you can make the comparisons. That's also quite crucial in the area of water, because water has a very complex relations in different domains. At least the upstream downstream relations is something that you can only address in the case that you have the comparable data that coming from the different countries. As I have already mentioned, so this should be fully publicly available and in different geographical scales and administrative scales, including the national level. And this should be also, I mean, from the IT perspective, this should be free, open software. This should be based on the free, open software standards. We have actually 3 important pillars when we are developing the principles of the shared environmental information systems. I should also a little bit address around this. So the first one is exactly the content. So the content is the one of the pillars where you should address or identify explicitly what are the topics or types of the data that you are going to share. So, and the second is the infrastructure. It's mostly on the IT perspective, IT side. What are the tools that you are going to use when you are reporting the data or when you are sharing the data and information among each other? And the third one is exactly the corporation. Who is going to report the data, and on what, and when, and by what means? So these are the 3 pillars which are quite important when you are developing such a system and sharing the data and information. I have on the last slide, by means of the EU support, EU financial support, we have also replicated such a concept into the national domains. Particularly, I would like to give you 3 examples from the Caucasus countries. So we replicated a subset of the European Environmental Information System, which is called as the Water Information System for Europe. So we replicated exactly the concept of the WISE into the national domains in Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan by means of the EU funds. And now in Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, we have the Water Information System. It's playing a gateway among the many different national agencies that dealing with the different aspects of the water resource management at the local, regional, and national level. So this is a platform where you can find the data fully harmonized, as well as the information about the different content of the water resource management from the national to the international scales can also be found in these platforms. I would suggest to visit these platforms to see exactly what are the IT perspective and what are the content management systems across the different topics that we introduce in this information system that would give you some inspirations. By saying this, I would like to stop here. And again, thank you very much for this very nice and very good initiative taken by INBO, and also a very kind invitation to the EA, which also gave me a chance to address to you about this type of developments. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup pour cette excellente intervention. Alors, étant donné le temps qui nous reste, nous allons passer à la phase des questions-réponses et je vais reposer une question donc, qui a déjà été répondue dans le chat rapidement. Est-ce que les utilisateurs peuvent-ils évaluer et comprendre dans quelle mesure la qualité des données correspond à leurs objectifs, à savoir le soutien des politiques de gouvernance? C'est une question qui s'adresse à Monsieur François Hissel.
Oui, merci. Alors, je n'ai pas mentionné effectivement l'association des utilisateurs de la gouvernance du système d'information.
But suffice it to add that we have a group associating the users, finding the users of such data and the stakeholders of water policies that meet at the national level, that include farmers, industrialists, associations, nature protectors, river basin agencies, and which define the major or proposes the major recommendations and orientations that we strive to implement to guarantee that we really meet with the need of the users with the system thus implemented. Thank you very much, Mr. François Hissel, for your response. We're now going to maybe also ask for one last question, or read out one last question. We've already received a question from Maria Van, also to your attention, and she asks whether the data are of public domain. All in the public domain. Yes, yes, yes. We strive to see to it that all the data be open source, except some by law protected information which are not open, but it's really very, very minor versus the number of data that are open source or of free use. Thank you very much, Mr. Hissel, for all of the answers and for all of the answers to your other questions. We will be able to respond to them, and please feel free to write down your links or addresses in the chat. And I would like to thank all of the speakers for the quality of their presentation. And I'm now going to recognize the floor to Mr. Eric Tardieu, who is the Secretary General of INBO, International Network of Basin Organizations. Thank you, each and everyone. Thank you, Anaïs. Thank you. Yeah. We're now making it to the end of this webinar, whose length is quite ambitious, but we are very pleased by having you up until the end of this webinar. I would like to insist again, if need be, on the very quality of the content of this webinar. I don't know whether really everyone is aware of the expertise and the knowledge that we have gathered during these 2 hours. I'm not going to throw flowers onto Riyadh by so saying, but I would like to thank our speakers, panelists, roundtable panelists for the quality of the information as well as the sharing information and experience that they have been able to propose to us. But by way of conclusion, I would like to really touch back on 3 ideas that are, to my eyes, important, i.e. the information system and the sharing of data and information are part and parcel of an increasing complexity complex that have been put forth by many of our panelists, an increasing complexity whereby we have new pressures, more important and greater pressures on the water resources, and hence this leads to new knowledge needs of integration of more data relating the resource, the uses, the pressure, the reasons for conflicts or potentials, a complexity also related to the progressive structuring of organizations. We all know for fact that the involved stakeholders, public or private, are more and more numerous. Our societies are developing and gaining in complexity, and the number of data producers does require architectures that are more and more capable of managing this complexity and this increase in data production numbers. Thank Godly, the technologies are making headway, the solutions are evolving and enriching, and we have zeroed in on some of them. It was not really the main topic of our conversation, but we've talked about this open data, the IoT, Internet of Things, the big data, et cetera, and these are very important contributions and inputs that make it possible to better cater for these topics and respond there to. Another complexity element that I would like to make mine and also reformulate is that our information system on water must be able at the same time to meet needs of different communities. The most immediate community and the easiest community, that one that is most evident, is ours. The community of water specialists, the water practitioners, those who have rapid access to the understanding of the datum and its information relevance. But the other two elements that have also increased in relevance are populations, the public at large. Several examples come to mind that have shown that how much the making available, making more pedagogical, and easing the understanding of data today is paramount to having the grassroots policies adhere and conform to the public changes. And the third target audience with which I will conclude is that of the decision makers community, including the public decision makers, the KOLs, the key opinion leaders, the political personalities who are in charge of the decision making on the implementation of new public policies that have to react to the assessment of these public policies. And I think it is an essential point here at Haener. We have to really recall ourselves to the fact that all of these information systems of water, all of these data sharing that we have mentioned does have a final and ultimate goal, which is essential, whereby good decisions, better decisions, and in a larger number of cases, better public determinations, less decisions, be made ultimately with a view to improving the management of water resources, the integrated water resources management at the territorial levels that are relevant, and including, of course, for the real benefit and interest of the population. I'm not going to say more than that, but with concluding that, first, please now switch on your cameras for a family snapshot. And I'm saying this while I'm continuing to speak. Thank you very much. And I would like to indicate that the last webinar of the season will be on the 6th of July, next July, which will be dealing with the needs of skills and competence from the point of view of river basins and the different uses of water resources at the river basins. The 6th of July will be the last meeting webinar, if I could say, of the academic year. INBO academic year, and you are most welcome. I would also conclude by thanking our interpreters who have quite a lot of work to do while we are having them to put, and we take a point of honor in remaining in this trilingual format that would allow it, of course, to see what is now occurring on a very large expanse of land. Thank you to our two moderators, facilitators, who have with very much brio highlighted the buzzers, the challenges were real also, and thank you very much for having remained this numerous for the last 2 hours. You will find all of the information on our internet site, including the presentations. Thank you very much for your attention, sustained attention, and we are sure and hoping to meet you again for other adventures, and keep safe and stay well, and goodbye everyone. Thank you.